So another compendium video. Thanks once again for supporting the Big House 7. I was asked to talk about MDVA and their rising stars, and to just name a few of their players that have been, doing pretty well for themselves and rising the ranks. I'm primarily going to talk about Junebug, Laud, Rishi, and Zane. And I'll toss in a little bit of Jerry here, but keep in mind there are players like Chudat, Red, and Chillin, who have been longtime veterans of the MDVA scene. I'm not really going to be talking about them in this video, though, but I just want to point out that I acknowledge that they are also top players within the region. So what are my thoughts on them? What I'm mostly going to talk about, I guess, their potential. I'm going to start off with Junebug, who was #1 on the PR in June 2017. I think Junebug is overall just a really solid player. It came from Project M as his main game, but I'm not sure if he still plays, but I think his main game is now mostly focusing on melee. He had some decent performances over the summer: 17th at Big House, I believe 25th at Shine, and then some okay performances. I believe he got top 64 at SmashCon. So he's kind of getting up there. Maybe it's because of his seeding that he's not getting good brackets, and maybe he could do some other stuff to improve, as long as people recognize that he's a pretty good player and that he gets better seeding. So he's been on the top of MDVA. He usually gets the better end of Zane, Rishi, and Laud, but I think the other players have been bringing it more even. What I like from Junebug as a player is that he's very fundamentally sound. His moves are really well thought out, and he's pretty consistent. His punishes are decent. Now, to say that, I don't know what his peak potential is. He was a top player in Project M, so given that, I think he could do pretty well here. But I think the big thing I would like to say is that I think he needs to play a little bit faster. I think he's really used, I think this is a common MDVA theme, is that they play at a certain tempo where it's a little bit slow. They kind of wait for things. But the issue is that when you play faster players that get to their spots quicker, or they're at the point where you throw out their opponent is faster, they throw out option A, you wait for it, but they're so fast that they're doing something else so that you can't do your counter option. I think that's the big issue with a lot of MDVA players, and it really shows not so much in the spacey matchups. Like Rishi, Zane, and Laud are all good at it, but in a lot of the other matchups that aren't spaceys, I think they kind of struggle a bit because they play at a slower pace that makes it so they're not severely they're not pressuring their opponents enough. And I feel like to just get to that next level for Junebug, he needs to play at a tempo and have his presence there to the point where he's forcing bad decisions rather than just playing his slow pace where he's kind of catching his opponent's mistakes or bad decisions. So I think he's a good player. I give him tremendous respect. I love watching him play. I think everything is just really thought out for him. So that's my thoughts on him. I think in the same vein, Rishi is very similar. He's a very contemplative player. He loves to think things out, and you can tell that when he loses a set to a player, that chances are he's going to theory craft a lot of his matchups that he struggles with, and next time come out a lot stronger. And I think the big example that we could have here is that his Sheik matchup has been improving steadily, and he did beat Swedish Delight that one time at Genesis, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement for him. But I think the big issue I do have is similar to Junebug, whereas I think he plays a little bit slow. And it works against spaceys. I think he has those matchups down pretty well. But I don't see the pressure game from him. I think he just kind of plays at a pace. He does the common baits that most top 25 to top 100 players will likely fall for. But once he hits the top 20 level players, are not going to fall for as much basic stuff or the common baits that most lower level players will fall for. I also think that him and Junebug, while we're talking about it, make a lot of minor mistakes that lead into big match losses. And one thing that comes to mind is when he played Wizzy and he missed some punishments and follow-ups. So the one thing I could say is that although they're very smart and they have stuff like their pivots that are really solid, I think the big issue with them is that sometimes they make big crucial mistakes, and more frequently than the better players, which cause them to lose matches. So hopefully if you're going to play the attrition game and you're going to play at a slower pace, the whole point is that you want to make less mistakes than your opponent, but sometimes they end up making more mistakes, and these are unforced errors, and that's where they lose a lot of matches. So, but Rishi's doing well for himself. I think he's probably, it's reasonable to say he's probably like a top 35 to 40 player. The next player, Lod, I think he's very interesting because I think he travels the least out of the 4 players, but I think he has a lot of potential. I think his peach is amazing. He's been drug fox a few times. I think the order of peach mains in terms of ranking is first Armada. I think second should go to Triff, and then third and fourth you could probably go back and forth between Lod and Bladewise, but given the recent performances, I think it's pretty reasonable to put Lod at number 3, given his summer was pretty solid. I just think that Lod hits very hard for a peach. I like his punish game. He doesn't give up too many free hits as much as the other peaches do. Like MacD, gives up free hits in there. His edge guarding is really solid, and he knows how to punish players. So I think that's what really stood out to me for Lod is that it's very clean. The way he plays peach, the way his movement works, the way his decision making is, it's very methodical, very clean. His punishment game is great, and his edge guards are pretty solid. So it's I think it comes down to this whole thing of just improving little bits and pieces of every aspect of his game, and as he continues to grind each aspect and get more experience in different things, he's only going to get better. But that baseline skill is there for him to get really good, and it's unfortunate that he doesn't travel as much. I don't know the exact reasons why, but this guy could easily hit top 20 and top 25, and I wouldn't be very surprised. He's a very solid player. I think the big issue I have with Lod is that he should never, ever, 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 ever play Falco ever again in singles. Lastly, we have Zane, who's probably going to be the most talked about player in MDVA. Honestly speaking, given the results that he's had, given the wins he's had, I think you could put this guy potentially at top 20. You can certainly seed him in the 20s. Just to read some of his results, he top 8 at SmashCon. He finished in top 8 at DreamHack Denver. Worst performance was Big House 7 at 17th. Still pretty good results. This guy is really solid. A lot of great wins. He has a win over Leffen, beat SFAT, beat Westballs, Mike Hayes. Overall, and he beat Plup a year ago. So you look at his resume compared to a lot of people in the top 20 to 25, and although maybe he loses random matchups here and there, but you can certainly say that, especially against Spaceys, this guy's a monster. And the big thing here is that it's some people may criticize him and say, well, this guy doesn't have a good matchup spread, and I would agree with you. I think he struggles with March, Sheik, and Falcon, and even Samus, these characters. But the fact of the matter is that the meta is very Fox heavy, and for the fact that he can contend with even Leffen and win a set is huge. It means that it's very likely that he will make it far in bracket, because you look at the number of top 25 Foxes that you put against him and the fact that he'd probably have a good shot at winning. We can list him off. I think he has a good chance against Lucky. I think he has a great chance against Mike Hayes. I think he will probably beat KGH. I think he'd probably beat Crush. I think he'd probably beat Cyrox, and he's shown to beat Leffen. I'm not going to say that every time he's going to beat Leffen and SFAT, but the fact that he can beat so many Foxes and means that he will consistently get pretty far. Now, the issue I have with him and where he might get overhyped is that if he doesn't get the right bracket, let's say he gets 2 Falcons, or he gets Falcon Samus, or Sheik Marth, or he gets Marth Dittas, I think this is where you can see him go from this player that could reach top 8, who can get top 6, to a player where he may get 33rd, 49th, or even 65th. And to that, I wouldn't say I would ask and probably assume oh yeah, he probably got the characters he didn't want to play. So that's the one thing. On one hand, I think he has a lot of potential, and Blur and I, when we talk on Commentator's Curse, we always say, what is their rate of improvement? What is their rate of improvement? Have they plateaued? And this is the same logic that most people have with young players in sports, because they still have a lot to grow in and a lot to learn, and they're not plateauing or reaching their peak anytime soon. So That's the potential of Zayn. He can be a top 15 player based on results alone. You can compare him to Pew Pew or the Moon. You could say that, you know, between the Pew Pew, Moon, and Zayn, that Zayn might actually have, just on results over the summer and in the fall, that he's the best Marth out of those three. It sounds a little bit weird, but you look at the results, it sounds a little bit unintuitive. But yeah, like Zayn has been very impressive in the summer. So I'm looking forward to his potential. I do think that some bad brackets will hamper him, and I do think that him going to other regions and playing different characters will help him a lot. I can foresee him losing to like a random Luigi or Mario or Doc or Pikachu just because he doesn't have the experience. But the fact of the matter is he's still young. He's a sponge in terms of learning. Like, I see him get better every time. I see him at a tournament. Those are just my general thoughts on MDVA. I just think they have a lot of potential. I think they're really good. They're all really fundamentally sound, and it just really comes down to them traveling more and getting the experience. And who knows, maybe in like a year or two, like, you might see a potential upset where you have, let's say, you know, Chu, Zayn, Junebug, Lod, and Rishi, and then 1 to 2 years, they might be able to get really far in a big house crew battle and upset like a SoCal, NorCal, or I wouldn't say they could beat Europe or Florida anytime soon because they're super stacked, but I don't know, in a certain universe, I could see them actually beating SoCal in a crew battle, which is crazy to say because 2 years ago, MDVA was a joke. They had no good players. Frankly, at the Big House 6, was it? Their crew was an utter joke, and S2J just mauled through everybody. So big improvement. Props to them for stepping up, and those are my thoughts on MDVA.